Alright, you guys, it's your boy the Kryptonian saying here, bringing you a review for One Piece chapter 240, and just gonna go ahead and give this chapter review a 5 out of 5. And I know that seems a little odd. You're like, yo, the last few chapters you've been given 3s and 4s. Why is this one a 5 out of 5? Why wasn't the last one a 5 out of 5? Got very tempted to give that one 5 out of 5, but this one, there's just so much of an enjoyment factor, man. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be laughs that make me give it a perfect rating. So without any further ado, let's just dive into the chapter review. So the chapter opens up and you have Luffy. He's on the waiver, he's riding it, and Luffy falls off of it. And right away, that was pretty funny, but the auto enthusiast inside of me was going, that's what you get, Luffy. And the reason why I'm saying that is you can't just jump into a car and you don't have respect for the power. You don't have respect for the machine, if you will. And that's exactly what Luffy did in this case. While the waiver isn't a car, it's still a vehicle. And I like the science behind it where they have the shells, and depending on the type of shell that they use, like for this with the waivers, they use these shells that are able to propel air, which is how they're able to move across the ocean. But the waivers are so light, so Luffy falls off, and Sanji makes a good point. He's like, damn, I really wonder if Devil Fruit users are gonna sink through the white sea like they do in the regular sea. And I'm going, it would make sense. Even though this is a cloud, it's still a sea. And if you go back to when the Devil Fruits were first introduced, it was made very clear that the sea does not like Devil Fruit users. So that right there just tells me it doesn't matter if it's the white sea, the green sea, the yellow sea, which that would be messed up if there's a yellow sea, because that would be a sea of urine, if you will. Or if it's Sanji and it's like mustard. But I don't know, Oda's doing something with the colors, man. That's why I threw that in there. I don't know what he's doing, but it seems like there's, you know, some colors going in here. But the crazy thing about this is Nami gets on there and she takes it like it's nothing. And I absolutely loved it, right? And the reason why I love that is what we got to see is Nami is not only a good navigator, but I'm willing to bet that if there's anything that moves over water, she's able to operate it fairly quickly. And that played a large part of me giving this a 5 out of 5, because while Luffy got on there and, you know, basically fell on his face, right? Nami gets on there and she says, you don't have a delicate enough touch, Luffy, which makes sense because I could see Luffy being very heavy-handed. It looked like he was just stomping on the pedal, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but because that rider is so light, it's like driving a car, okay? Like for me, I have a Mustang, but I also have different modifications done to it, and it's a stick shift. And because I've reduced the weight, like my Mustang weighs, I would say around 31, somewhere around 3,200 pounds. I've done a lot of weight reduction on it. And the thing about it is because it weighs what it does, you have to be careful when you drive it. You know, like if I take off in second gear, because that's your power gear. If I take off in second gear, which that's a different video that I would probably do on Hey Hayes if I was very active on that channel. But the thing is when the car weighs as little as it does, you can't just, you know, stomp the pedal, or you can't stomp the pedal in a stick shift, but you have to respect what you have. Otherwise, you're going to turn the car over, you're going to flip it. And that's what happens, you know, like, to get off subject, it's on subject, off subject a little bit. That's what happens with a lot of kids when they get these really powerful cars or these really light sports cars and they don't know how to handle the power. Like I remember being in high school and, you know, God bless the dead, but, you know, a friend of mine, Scott, he had a IROC Camaro, right? That's the 3rd generation, and he was riding that, and we used to be on there, and his was an automatic, and I want to say it's automatic. I just remember it was a 3rd gen because he had 2 Camaros. He had a 4th gen automatic and he had a 3rd gen. But the thing is, it's like that car was, you know, pretty light, had a little power to it, and there were times where we almost flipped off the road because he couldn't handle it. You know, another kid that I went to school with wrapped his car around a tree. He had a Mustang Cobra. He had a 2003, the Terminator engine. And that's a light car, but it's got a lot of power. And if you don't respect it, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to end up like Luffy. So, you know, soapbox moment over. But the way, I just like the way Oda ties in real world examples, how you can take stuff from the real world and you can apply it to One Piece. And he does it even further. What we are seeing when we're walking up the staircase is we're getting told that you have different seas, like you have different clouds, and the clouds, it depends on the nuclei and just how they're all made up. Like Oda's incorporating science in this, and the geek in me is loving this, man. Like I'm absolutely loving it. And this is right here with what Akira Toriyama does with the Dragon Ball timelines, where he's actually using laws from physics in order to make his whole parallel timeline things, where you have 4 timelines in Dragon Ball. And it's the same thing here with Oda. Oda has incorporated actual science into Skypiea. So that's cool, man. That's really cool. And I like how we see Luffy's jealousy. And what I really appreciate about this is Luffy's character is starting to go through another arc. He's very childish. However, at the same time, you know that Luffy's going to try and learn how to use that damn waiver, right? And even the one that they have broken, once he finds out that they just need to use a dial, and once they get the right dial, they'll be okay. What I thought was very interesting about that is what we are seeing is Luffy. Not only is he jealous, but he's determined, but Luffy sees something that he can't do. You know, what we've seen in One Piece so far is usually if Luffy puts his mind to something, Luffy can do it. He hasn't really failed. And so for him to fail at something like this, that was pretty cool. But Luffy has the right attitude, and that's something I want a lot of you guys to take away from this. You know, if you fail at something, don't get hung up on it, right? You know, you got to take the approach Luffy does. If things don't go the way that you expect them to go, look at the opportunities in front of you. You know, don't forget that you failed. And if you get an opportunity to make things right, make things right. That's what he plans to do. I'm assuming if he can get the right dial that will go on that waiver, or a living dial, because the one that they have is probably dead. Even though it's 200 years old, we get told that it's still going to work. And what I like about how Luffy handled this is he's still looking at the different shells that are around, and he's playing with one of them. Flies, like hat flies off because it's pushing out air. Like Luffy is continuing to find stuff to entertain him, find stuff to preoccupy him, and that's what you have to do. Anytime you're in bad circumstances, you have to take that route. So that was cool. Another thing is seeing Sanji, just the humor in it. You have some Sanji and Zoro beef back and forth where they're arguing because Zoro's just like, you could have gone in there and saved him, but you were standing around. Sanji did go save him, but Zoro has a good point. Instead of wondering, it probably be better for you to go out there instead of just being curious. And I like how this is like a throwback nod to when we first get introduced to Sanji, because right after Luffy defeats Don Krieg, he's standing there watching Luffy drown, and he's thinking, oh, he's gonna swim, and Zeph has to tell him like, no, devil fruit users can't swim, idiot, go get him. And in that case, I get it. Sanji was just like, oh, he should be able to swim. But he knows better now. And he's actually saved him a few times from drowning after this. And I think this was more of the curiosity getting him than it was of, I'll just trust Luffy. Like, because when it comes to certain things like this, it's not about trust. It's about protecting somebody from themselves. And that's what I really feel like Oda has with this crew, is having members who can protect Luffy from Luffy when Luffy has you big dummy moment. So that part's cool. Now, another thing that I thought was interesting with Sanji is how he's in the kitchen and he's like, yo, this sauce is outdated. Get rid of it. And I just love that, because I know for me, like when I go into like my sister's pantry and I'm looking, like sometimes I gotta protect myself. Protect herself from her. Because I go in there and like some of the fruit will be rotten, or like the cans will be out of date, and I'm like, God, I got to check anything before I come over here and cook. So that's cool. That's cool to see that. Now, in closing, I like how Oda is continuing the world building. So not only are we in Skypiea and we're getting all this information, right, about how there's different ways to get up there, and just the land waiver, not the land waiver, the sea waiver, and like the different dials and the uses for them. Great world building. But then we get to where Nami's at. Now, I cannot remember what they called this. It is called the upper yard, the domain of the kami. You know, this is another Viz translation. I know this one. I caught this one because the Viz translation is saying the kami, and they changed that because it's God. So I mean, I understand that. You know, Viz. That's not just Viz. That's a lot of U.S. companies. They'll make changes when it comes to religious stuff or different names that might be offensive. You know, so I can understand that. You know, I personally, this kind of irked me, right? Because I know that Viz has changed stuff before, but I really feel like if you're gonna translate the manga, if you know that there's gonna be some offensive stuff in there, make a separate edition. Might not sell as much. Personally, I think it sell more, but might not sell as much. But make a separate edition where it's just like 100% translated all the way through, man. Like, who cares if it's offensive? Because that's the way that the original material was meant. And you got to understand, it's only offensive because the culture is different. You know, if you're gonna respect the author and what they intended, you have to take in that their culture is gonna be different than yours. That's some very Eurocentric, you know, shit that's going on right there. So overall, like I said, good chapter, 5 out of 5. My chapter question for you guys is twofold. What did you think about what I was saying with Luffy and Nami and just that comparison to operating cars? You know, what do you think about that? And then my second question is what did you think about the world building in this chapter? Because Oda has been layering it on the last few chapters, but he dropped a lot of information in this chapter, and he does it in a very subtle way. Personally, I'm going to give my answer to that second one, but personally, I like this because Oda is doing what I tell you guys a lot. You know, show, don't tell. You know, even with manga, you can take this approach. You know, he sprinkles it out. He doesn't just say, like, in big dialogue boxes that this is Skypiea and this is what waivers do. Instead, he shows us the characters explaining what's going on, and then we have instances where we actually see some of the dials doing what they're supposed to be doing. So he's doing it in a very slow, methodical way. It's like this, like when I write like a scene, right? I don't say the round brown table sitting in the corner. You go, there's a table in the corner. The edges around it's round, say something about the edges, but you just add details little by little. So you build the scene over time. You just don't bombard the reader with a whole bunch of information. You kind of ease them into it. It's like driving a stick shift. You know, like you can't just start off in fifth gear. There's a first gear for a reason. I know I said start off in second. A lot of people who race, you will drop down in the second gear. You'll rev up and then you'll start off in second gear because that's your power gear. You're able to accelerate quicker. There's because there's a very short throw between first and second gear. But if you're just casually driving, you can't do that. You got to start in first and work your way through the motion. So that's what Oda did in this, man. Like, and because it's over there in Japan, and because most foreigners have to drive manual transmissions, standard transmissions, stick shift, whatever you want to call it, I could really see if this was something. And I would be very interested to know if Oda is an auto enthusiast. So, as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, hit that like button, comment, rate, subscribe, share.